The State Capture Commission of Inquiry will continue to hear Eskom-related evidence today. Former Eskom board member Vinette Klein, Varoshni Naidu and Dr. Path Manathan Naidu are set to take the stand today. On Tuesday, resource manager Dr. Ayanda Ndeta testified on the power utility 600 million rand prepayment to Tegeta. Ndeta says the Gupta-owned company approached her in 2016 with a proposal, and she approached her supervisors, including Eskom Chief Procurement Officer Edwin Mabelane. She claims Mabelane told her to prepare submissions for the procurement of coal from Tegeta Resources. For more on this, I am joined by our senior reporter, Tumaole Mohlaoli. Tumaole, a very good morning to you. You've been watching Eskom and State Capture Commission of Inquiry very closely, and we know that Vinette Klein returns, and the last time Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo was asking her about the nature of a meeting with executives, and her response to it shocked the Deputy Chief Justice.
Absolutely. Her response to it seems to contradict what other, testimony evidence leaders or people who gave testimony rather on the Eskom stream seem to remember about that meeting. Now, this meeting supposedly happened around 2015, and this is when the executives were, sidelined, so to speak, where they were suspended, and then afterwards it turns out that they were offered multi-million rand payouts to basically step aside. This is after an inquiry found out that they had done nothing wrong. Now, what is key about this is that there seems to be various accounts as to what happened in that particular meeting. According to Mr. Tsotsi, who was at the helm of the board at the time, he seems to remember that a decision was taken for the executives to step aside and not necessarily to be fired or to be paid out. Now, steps aside, a decision was taken for them to step aside while an investigation was being taken into basically some wrongdoing on their part. They were slapped with various allegations, but it turns out that the investigation which the State Capture Commission of Inquiry is going into is that this move was effectively for them to be sidelined so that the power utility could be captured. So she's coming to basically answer more questions because her evidence was earlier contradicted by Zola Tsotsi and others who had a different account of what happened in the meeting and what was said in the meeting. Now, very interestingly, Mpo, the minutes to that meeting, which are key to what actually happened, seem to have gone missing. In fact, a recording of that meeting, of that critical period in that meeting as to what was said by whom, when, also has gone missing. So this will be very interesting to hear what she has to say and what she has to account to, because various other witnesses have contradicted what her version was as to what happened, leading to the suspension of the executives at Eskom, which plunged the power utility into a crisis.
Yeah, and another important part of Vinette Klein's testimony was the information revolving around a rather controversial email address that, we also heard Matsela Koko saying that he was shocked that, he wasn't aware that this wasn't an internal email.
Yes, absolutely. Matsela Koko, the former CEO of Eskom, saying that he wasn't aware that essentially what has come out is that it seems that Eskom's internal communications were essentially, hijacked by an outsider because there was an email address, I think it was called a businessman. And this particular email address, he assumed that this email address belonged in-house. And this is how the various executives would then communicate with the board on various critical matters. So this raises some serious questions about some very key and critical in-house communications that were meant to be confidential going to an outside source. It turns out, according to investigations that the Commission has done and various testimonies, that this email businessman supposedly belonged to Gupta associate and a known Lieutenant Salim Essa. Now, Matsela Koko did say that he was very surprised because he thought that that email was an in-house email. In fact, even Dr. Ben Ngubane, when he testified before the Commission of Inquiry, thought that that email was an in-house email that was then administered by Suzanne Daniels, who was the executive secretary of the Eskom at the time, and thinking that she would then get particular communications and then alert various executives on what needed to be done, whether they needed to respond to that. So to their surprise, it turns out that email had nothing to do with Eskom and was actually being administered from outside Eskom and could be linked to Salim Essa, meaning that the Guptas would have had access to very key inside information from Eskom and would have given them, foreknowledge about what was happening in terms of decisions linked to tenders and linked to other very key procurement activities that the power utility was involved in.
You've already mentioned the missing minutes of a very crucial meeting. As we look to hear more about the dynamics at Eskom today, what are some of the big talking points that Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo will likely touch on?
Well, some of the big talking points that Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo will touch on will be the issue of accountability. That seems to be one of the key issues that is in question at Eskom when you listen to the various testimonies. Everyone seems to be shifting and trying to shift the blame. Decisions being taken and no one seeming to be wanting to be held to account. And everyone seeming to be pointing the finger at everyone else to say, well, at every turn, we thought this person was supposed to do A, B, and C, whereas that person thinks the other person was supposed to be there. So this will be part of the key issues, because this is what Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo has been saying when it comes to streams like Eskom, even with the other SOEs and even municipalities. Where was their accountability? Where does the buck stop when people are dealing with such large amounts? We know that when Vinette Klein last took the stand, one of the issues that Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo took particular exception with was the fact that when it was calculated about the payout of the executives, the millions that were paid out to them, essentially to resign from Eskom. While the investigation was going, they were suspended, they stepped aside, but then they were offered a golden handshake. She then turned around and said, Eskom as a power utility, has a turnaround of hundreds of millions, if not billions, every year. What is a couple of million to these guys? But Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo was saying particularly, and very scathing, saying, how can you say that when we're looking at what is happening to SOEs, and we're looking at the state of the country, when we're looking at how the state of Eskom at the moment and how it needs bailouts constantly from Treasury, and you say these millions, which could have gone a long way, are nothing when it looks to the when it comes to the bottom line. So this might be some of the issues that maybe she's had a rethink, and we'll watch her very closely to see how she engages and whether she's reconsidered some of those points.
And some of the other former board members also expected to be giving their version of events. What are some of the expectations and the line of questioning around that?
Well, some of the board members, including Viroshni Naidu and Dr. Pathamathan Naidu, are expected to take the stand. I'll be very curious to watch Dr. Pathamathan Naidu, because we do know that during some of his engagements with Parliament, for instance, he was not shy to blow his own trumpet and say that he was essentially the best thing that happened to Eskom. Very famously, in fact, one of the committee members, Floyd Shivambo of the EFF, called him to order, because instead of answering questions that the committee was asking about what was happening at Eskom at the time, he felt that Mr. Naidu was taking too much time, talking about himself and saying how great he was for Eskom. But at the same time, he was asking and answering very serious questions about why Eskom was in crisis. If he was so great for Eskom, what happened during his tenure there? So we will be very interesting to watch exactly what kind of posture he comes to the Commission of Inquiry. We've seen before people who've come with a very overconfident kind of posture have been cut down to size by the evidence leaders and by Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo.
Thank you so much. Let's leave it there for now. Certainly looking forward to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry now focusing on Eskom-related matters.